At my son-in-law's birthday, my daughter-in-law laughed and said, "Who invited the nosy old lady?" But when they saw who was in the tribute video as the one who funded their wedding, everyone begged for my forgiveness. Your presence here means so much to me. Watch until the end and leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far my story has reached. At my son-in-law's birthday, my daughter-in-law laughed and said, "Who invited the old gossip?" When they saw who was in the tribute video as the financier of their wedding, everyone begged for my forgiveness. The words hung in the air like poison. I stood frozen by the dessert table, the slice of cake I'd carefully selected suddenly heavy in my hands. I could feel every eye in the room turn toward me, some embarrassed, others curious, a few even amused. But no one, not a single person, spoke up. Not even my daughter, Emily. "Mom," Emily whispered, approaching me with that look I'd grown to hate, part pity, part embarrassment. "Just ignore Vanessa. You know how she gets after a few drinks." I nodded mechanically, placing the untouched cake back on the table. My hands were trembling slightly, but I forced a smile. "I think I'll get some fresh air," I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. As I stepped onto the patio of my son-in-law Michael's extravagant home, the home I helped them afford but would never mention, I caught my reflection in the window. At 55, I wasn't old. Tired, perhaps. Invisible, definitely. But not old. 3 years ago, I had sold the house I'd raised Emily in, the house filled with memories of her childhood, of her father before cancer took him too early. I never told Emily what I did with that money. She assumed I'd invested it, secured my retirement. Instead, every penny went to giving her the wedding of her dreams. A wedding where I was seated at the back, away from Vanessa's family. "Mrs. Palmer?" A deep voice interrupted my thoughts. It was Richard, Michael's boss and mentor. "Beautiful party, isn't it?" "Yes, lovely," I replied automatically. I was just telling Michael what an impressive young man he is. Graduated with honors, landed a senior position at the firm so quickly, and managed to throw a wedding that people still talk about. He chuckled. I remember being broke as a joke at his age. I smiled tightly. If only he knew. "Well, I'm sure they appreciate your support," I said. "And yours too, of course." Richard raised his glass slightly. Michael mentioned how close Emily is with her mother. Was. How close she was. Before Vanessa. Before Michael's promotion. Before they moved to this neighborhood with houses so grand they made my modest apartment look like a shoebox. Back inside, Vanessa was center stage as usual, her laugh carrying across the room as she regaled their friends with another story. My daughter stood beside her, smiling that new smile she'd developed, polished, perfect, practiced. And then, Vanessa was saying loudly, "My mother-in-law shows up with this casserole dish like we're having some kind of potluck." The group erupted in laughter. That had been last Thanksgiving. I'd made Emily's favorite green bean casserole, the one she'd requested every holiday since she was 12. But apparently, that wasn't appropriate for Vanessa's carefully curated dinner party aesthetic. I slipped into the bathroom, needing a moment alone. The marble countertops gleamed under recessed lighting. Even their guest bathroom was more luxurious than my entire apartment. A text notification lit up my phone. It was from Sandra, my best friend since college. "How's the party? Did they like the gift?" I had given Michael a vintage watch that had belonged to Emily's father. It had taken me months to have it restored. I texted back, "Not sure. Haven't seen him open gifts yet." Sandra replied immediately, "Just wait until tomorrow. Got something that will make it all worthwhile." I frowned at her cryptic message but had no time to ask questions. There was a soft knock at the door. "Just a minute," I called, quickly dabbing at my eyes and checking my reflection. I emerged to find David, Sandra's husband and a professional filmmaker, hovering awkwardly in the hallway. "Sherry, there you are. Sandra's been trying to reach you." "My phone's on silent. Is everything okay?" He nodded, glancing around before lowering his voice. Better than okay. We have a surprise for tomorrow's continuation of the birthday weekend. A special video tribute for Michael. That's nice. I wasn't sure why he was telling me this. David smiled, an unusual gleam in his eye. Trust me, Sherry. You'll want to be here for this. As I made my way back to the party, Michael was preparing to make a speech. Standing tall in his tailored suit, he looked every bit the successful young executive. Vanessa beamed beside him, her hand possessively on his arm. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, he began. Especially those who traveled from out of town. His eyes briefly met mine, but there was no special acknowledgement. I was just another guest. Not the woman who had sold her home to finance their picture-perfect wedding. Not the mother who had worked 2 jobs to put her daughter through college. Just the old gossip no one really wanted around. Little did they know, tomorrow would change everything. I woke up the next morning with a heaviness that had nothing to do with the single glass of wine I'd nursed all evening. My modest hotel room was just 5 miles from Emily and Michael's house but felt worlds away from their affluent neighborhood. I checked my phone. 3 texts from Sandra, be there by noon. Trust me. Wear something nice. Whatever Sandra was planning, her excitement was palpable even through text messages. But I couldn't muster the same enthusiasm. Last night's humiliation still stung like an open wound. I'd spent most of the party trying to be invisible, a skill I'd perfected over the past 3 years. Ever since Emily had met Michael during her final year of college, I'd watched her gradually transform into someone I barely recognized. Their whirlwind romance had culminated in an engagement after just 8 months, and then came the wedding plans. Mom, we're thinking about the Bellevue Gardens for the venue, Emily had told me over coffee, her eyes sparkling. The Bellevue was the most exclusive wedding venue in the state, with a 2-year waiting list and a price tag that made my heart stop. That sounds expensive, sweetheart. Michael says we deserve the best. She'd looked down at her diamond engagement ring, another extravagance that had made me wonder about Michael's finances. But what about that garden venue we looked at? The one with the koi pond you loved? Emily had sighed. Vanessa says it's too basic. She's been such a help with planning, Mom. She knows all the right people. Vanessa. Michael's sister had appointed herself wedding planner from day one. An interior designer with connections throughout the city, she'd quickly taken charge, steering Emily away from her original vision of a simple, meaningful ceremony towards something that belonged in a celebrity magazine. I'd tried to be supportive, to offer suggestions, but each was dismissed with increasing impatience. Mom, that's not how things are done anymore, or Vanessa says that's considered tacky now. When Emily tearfully called me one evening about the deposit for Bellevue Gardens, a sum that exceeded her annual salary, I made my decision. I'd been considering downsizing anyway, I told myself. The house was too big for just me, had too many memories. I've been saving for your wedding since you were born, I lied. I want you to have your dream day. I sold my home of 20 years in just under a month, moving into a small apartment that cost half my previous mortgage. I never told Emily the truth. I wanted her to feel like a princess, not obligated. Besides, Michael had made it clear he wasn't interested in handouts, as he called them. His pride wouldn't have allowed him to accept such a generous gift from his mother-in-law. So I signed the checks behind the scenes, working through Vanessa, who was all too happy to take credit for making the impossible happen. The $120,000 I paid covered not just the venue but the catering, the flowers, the photographer, and the honeymoon to Bali. The wedding was stunning, everyone said so. I sat in my assigned seat, watching my only child dance in a designer gown in a room filled with crystal and roses. She was radiant. I told myself that was all that mattered. But then came the speeches. Michael thanked his parents for their unwavering support. He thanked Vanessa for her tireless efforts in planning the perfect day. Even Emily, in her brief speech, thanked her new in-laws for welcoming her into their family with such generosity. My name wasn't mentioned once. After the wedding, the distance grew. Emily and Michael moved into their new house, another expense I suspected they could barely afford. Invitations to dinner became less frequent. When I did visit, Vanessa was often there, casting disapproving glances at my clothes, my hair, my gifts. "Mom, could you maybe dress up a bit more when you come over?" Emily had asked gently after one such dinner. Michael's colleagues stop by sometimes, and appearances matter in his position. I'd spent the next day shopping for clothes I couldn't afford, desperate to not embarrass my daughter. Now, staring at my reflection in the hotel mirror, I wondered when I'd become so pathetic. When had I started prioritizing everyone's feelings above my own? When had I become an inconvenience rather than a mother? I carefully applied my makeup, chose the new navy dress I'd bought specifically for this weekend, slimming but age-appropriate, as the saleswoman had described it, and drove to Emily and Michael's house for day 2 of the birthday celebrations. Sandra and David were already there when I arrived, Sandra greeting me with a hug that lasted a moment too long. "You look beautiful," she whispered. "Are you ready?" "For what?" I asked, genuinely confused. She squeezed my hand. "Justice." Inside, the house was again filled with guests, most returning from the previous night, though the atmosphere was more casual. A brunch buffet had been set up on the dining table, and Michael was opening gifts in the living room. Emily spotted me and waved, but made no move to come over. Vanessa, however, approached with a mimosa in hand. "Sherry, you came back. Honestly, we thought you might have been offended by my little joke last night." She said it loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, placing a hand on my arm in a show of false concern. "It takes more than words to offend me, Vanessa," I replied, gently removing her hand. "Well, good," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Because Michael has a special video presentation coming up, and we wouldn't want you to miss it." Little did she know, it wasn't Michael's video that would change everything today. As David set up his equipment by the large screen TV, Sandra caught my eye and winked. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of something long forgotten: power. The brunch portion of Michael's birthday celebration was winding down. Guests had moved from the dining area to the spacious living room, where Michael was holding court, laughing at some anecdote told by one of his coworkers. I stood near the back, nursing my second cup of coffee, watching the social dynamics unfold like a theater production I wasn't cast in. Sandra approached, linking her arm through mine. "Come with me," she whispered, guiding me toward the kitchen where David was fiddling with his laptop. "What's going on?" I asked, my curiosity finally overcoming my hesitation. David looked up, his expression both serious and excited. "Remember all those interviews I did for that documentary series on modern family dynamics last year?" I nodded. Sandra had volunteered me for an interview about raising Emily as a widow. I'd spoken candidly about my experiences, the challenges, the joys. It had been cathartic. "Well," David continued, lowering his voice, "I also interviewed you about how you financed Emily's wedding." My heart skipped a beat. "You said that wouldn't be part of the documentary." "It wasn't," he assured me quickly. "But I kept the footage. And when I saw how they've been treating you..." His jaw tightened. "I edited it together with some other material." Sandra squeezed my hand. "It shows everything, Sherry. How you sold your house. How you worked with the wedding planner directly while letting Vanessa take credit. The meetings with the venue." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You recorded all that?" "With your permission," David reminded me. "For the documentary. But this footage never aired." My mind raced. David had shadowed me for several days during that period, capturing what I thought were background scenes of my daily life. But apparently, he'd documented much more. "I'm not sure this is a good idea," I said, though a part of me, a part one rarely acknowledged, thrilled at the thought of everyone finally knowing the truth. "They've treated you like an unwelcome guest in your daughter's life," Sandra said, her voice fierce with protective anger. "They've diminished everything you've sacrificed. It's time they knew." "But Emily will be humiliated," I protested weakly. "Emily needs to see the truth," Sandra countered. She's been manipulated by Vanessa and Michael for years. David closed his laptop. Look, the video is ready. I formatted it as a tribute to Michael. It starts with congratulations from colleagues, friends, family. Then it transitions to the wedding preparations, which naturally leads to my involvement. I finished. He nodded. I've already spoken to Michael about showing a special video compilation for his birthday. He thinks it's just messages from people who couldn't make it today. I took a deep breath. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. About restoring some balance to a relationship that had become painfully one-sided. Okay, I said finally. Let's do it. Sandra hugged me. It's time they saw you, Sherry. Really saw you. As we returned to the living room, Vanessa intercepted us, her expression suspicious. What are you three whispering about? Just helping David with the video presentation, Sandra replied smoothly. Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. What video presentation? A surprise for Michael, David explained. I mentioned it to him earlier this week. Well, I'm in charge of today's event schedule, and there's no video planned, Vanessa said with thinly veiled irritation. Actually, Michael called from across the room. David did mention something about a video from people who couldn't make it. Sounds fun, let's do it now before the next activity. Vanessa's face tightened, but she recovered quickly. Of course, honey. Whatever you want. As David connected his laptop to the large television, guests settled into chairs and couches. Emily caught my eye from across the room, giving me a curious look. I tried to smile reassuringly, but my heart was pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Ladies and gentlemen, David announced once everyone was seated, as a special birthday tribute to Michael, I've compiled some messages and memories from friends, family, and colleagues. He pressed play, and the screen filled with the image of Michael's boss offering birthday congratulations. This was followed by several other well-wishers, college friends, former colleagues, Michael's parents who had been unable to attend due to a previously scheduled cruise. Michael beamed with each message. Vanessa sat beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, smiling smugly as if she had orchestrated this surprise herself. Then the video transitioned to scenes from their wedding. Beautiful shots of the venue, the floral arrangements, the exquisite table settings. Vanessa straightened, clearly pleased to see her work highlighted. What a wonderful day that was, she commented loudly. I spent months coordinating every detail. And then, there I was on screen. Sitting across from the wedding planner at the Bellevue Gardens, checkbook in hand. So that's $30,000 for the deposit, my recorded self said, writing the check carefully. The wedding planner on screen nodded. And Mrs. Palmer, you're sure you want the payments to come directly from you? Most of our clients have the bride's parents and groom's parents split costs. No, on-screen Sherry replied firmly. Emily and Michael don't need to know the specifics. I'm handling it. The room had gone completely silent. I could feel eyes turning toward me, but I kept my gaze fixed on the screen. The video continued, showing me selling my house, the real estate agent saying clearly, and you're comfortable with this price, Mrs. Palmer? It's below market value, but it will allow for a quick sale as you requested. I need the funds for my daughter's wedding, I explained on camera. The timing is more important than getting top dollar. Then came footage of me working extra shifts at the community college where I taught part-time, followed by my evening administrative job at the medical office. As the video played on, revealing the full extent of my sacrifice, the atmosphere in the room changed. I finally dared to look around. Emily had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Michael sat rigid, his expression unreadable. And Vanessa looked like she wanted to disappear. The truth was finally out, and there was no taking it back. The video continued playing, its revelations washing over the silent room like waves breaking against a shore. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the usual ambient sounds of ice clinking in glasses or hushed comments had ceased entirely. On screen, I was meeting with the caterer. The seafood option adds another $35 per person, the caterer explained, but since this is for your daughter's wedding. She loves seafood, my recorded self replied with a sad smile. Let's do it. The scene shifted to me in my empty house, boxes stacked around me, the sold sign visible through the window. David's voice came from behind the camera. How do you feel about leaving this place? On screen, Sherry paused, her hand resting on the doorframe of what had been Emily's bedroom. This house has been my home for 20 years. It's where I raised Emily, where we made our memories after her father died. My voice cracked slightly. But what good is a house filled with memories if I can't give my daughter the wedding she deserves? Material things can be replaced. Her happiness can't. I heard a sob from somewhere in the living room but didn't turn to look. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen, from the evidence of a sacrifice I'd never intended anyone to see. The video shifted again, this time to me signing the final check for the wedding, a staggering sum that represented the last of the proceeds from my house sale. The wedding planner was beaming. Mrs. Palmer, this is going to be the most beautiful wedding. Your daughter is very lucky. My on-screen self smiled tiredly. Just please don't mention to anyone that I'm covering the costs. Emily and Michael think his parents and I are splitting everything equally. I don't want to embarrass them. The wedding planner nodded. Of course. Discretion is part of our service. Then came footage of the wedding day itself, me helping Emily with her dress, adjusting her veil, blinking back tears as I handed her the something blue that had been my own mother's. Mom, Emily had said, radiant in her gown, I know you've put so much into this day. If only she'd known how true those words were. The video then showed the ceremony, the reception, the speeches where I wasn't mentioned. It captured me sitting alone at my table while others danced, my expression a careful mask of contentment hiding the exhaustion and financial stress beneath. The final scene was me in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes, looking out the window at a view of the parking lot rather than the garden I'd tended for 2 decades. Was it worth it? David's voice asked from behind the camera. My recorded self didn't hesitate. Every penny. Every sacrifice. When you're a mother, your child's happiness becomes your own. The screen faded to black, and for several seconds, no one moved. Then Emily stood up, her face streaked with tears, and looked at me. Mom? Her voice broke on that single word, filled with question and shock and dawning horror. I couldn't speak. The emotions I'd suppressed for 3 years, the hurt, the loneliness, the desire for acknowledgement, rose to the surface, threatening to overwhelm me. Michael stood next, his face ashen. Mrs. Palmer, I had no idea. He turned to Vanessa. Did you know about this? Vanessa's composure had completely crumbled. She looked trapped, her eyes darting around as if seeking escape. I knew she contributed, but not the extent. That's a lie, Sandra interjected, stepping forward. You knew exactly where the money was coming from. You were the liaison with the wedding planner after Sherry specifically asked to remain anonymous. Is this true? Michael demanded, his voice harder now. Vanessa's silence was answer enough. Emily moved toward me, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Why didn't you tell me? The house. Mom, that was your home. You were so happy, I said simply. I didn't want anything to overshadow that. But we could have had a smaller wedding, something affordable, Emily insisted. I never would have wanted you to sacrifice your home. You did want a smaller wedding, I reminded her gently. Until Vanessa convinced you that you deserved the best. All eyes turned to Vanessa, who had the decency to look ashamed. The wedding was a networking opportunity, she said defensively. It elevated Michael's position at the firm, introduced him to the right people. Stop talking, Michael cut her off sharply. He turned to face the room full of guests who were witnessing this family implosion with varying degrees of discomfort and fascination. I think we need some privacy to discuss this as a family. Thank you all for coming. The guests didn't need to be told twice. Within minutes, they had gathered their belongings and filed out, murmuring apologies and goodbyes. Only Sandra and David remained, standing protectively near me. "I think you should go too," Michael told them, not unkindly. "Thank you for the video. It was eye-opening." Sandra looked at me questioningly. I nodded, squeezing her hand in gratitude. "I'll call you later," I promised. When they had gone, it was just the four of us. Emily couldn't stop crying. Michael looked shell-shocked. Vanessa had retreated to a corner of the room, arms wrapped defensively around herself. "Mom," Emily began, her voice small and broken, "I am so sorry. I had no idea." "I know, sweetheart. But why?" she persisted. "Why go to such extremes and then hide it?" I took a deep breath. "Because after your father died, all I wanted was to see you happy, settled, secure. When you met Michael and fell in love, you were so excited about the wedding. But then everything kept getting bigger, more expensive." "Because of me," Vanessa interrupted, her voice hollow. "I kept pushing for more, better, grander. I wanted people to see how successful we were as a family. And I went along with it," Emily admitted, the realization dawning painfully. "I got caught up in it all, the venue, the dress, the flowers. I never once questioned how we were affording it." Michael had been silent, but now he turned to me, his expression grave. "Mrs. Palmer, Sherry, what you did for us was incredible. And how we've treated you since, it's unforgivable." "You didn't know," I said, though the words felt inadequate against the magnitude of what had been revealed. "But we should have," Emily insisted, moving to take my hands in hers. "We should have seen what was happening. Instead, we've been treating you like—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Like an unwelcome obligation," I supplied quietly. Emily flinched as if I'd slapped her, but she didn't deny it. "Yes," she whispered. "And that's on us. On me." The truth hung in the air between us, painful but necessary. For the first time in years, we were seeing each other clearly, without the filters of expectation or resentment. What happened next would determine if this family could be rebuilt from the ashes of assumption and neglect. In the aftermath of the video, the house felt too large and too small all at once. We moved from the living room to the kitchen, where Emily mechanically made tea that no one would drink. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence, marking the passing of minutes that felt like hours. "I need to understand," Michael finally said, breaking the heavy silence. "Why didn't you tell us? Why let us believe my parents had contributed equally when they hadn't given anything?" I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, gathering my thoughts. "Your parents had made it clear they couldn't help financially. You were so proud, Michael. I didn't want you to feel indebted to me. So instead you let my sister take credit?" The edge in his voice was directed at Vanessa, who hadn't spoken since her partial confession. "It wasn't about credit," I said softly. "It was about Emily's happiness." Emily shook her head, tears threatening again. "But at what cost, Mom? Your home? Your retirement savings?" I reached for her hand across the table. "I made my choice, sweetheart. I just never expected." I trailed off, not wanting to sound accusatory. "You never expected to be treated like an outsider afterward," Michael finished for me, his expression grim. "Like a burden." "The old gossip," I said quietly, looking directly at Vanessa for the first time since the video ended. She flinched, her face flushed with shame. "I didn't know you'd sold your house," she said weakly. "But you knew I was paying for most of the wedding," I countered. "You were the one who deposited my checks." "Yes," she admitted, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "But I thought. I assumed you had the money, that it wasn't a hardship." "Would it have mattered?" Emily asked, her voice surprisingly sharp. "If you had known it was a hardship, would you have done anything differently? Would you have stopped pushing for the bigger venue, the imported flowers, the designer dress?" Vanessa had no answer. "The thing is," I continued, finding my voice growing stronger, "I never regretted helping with the wedding. What hurt was how quickly I became an afterthought once it was over. The canceled dinners. The comments about my clothes, my job, my life. The way you all spoke to me, like I was something to be tolerated rather than included. Emily reached across the table, grabbing my hands. Mom, I am so sorry. I got caught up in this new life, these new people. I wanted to fit in so badly that I forgot who really mattered. We all did, Michael added, his voice heavy with regret. He turned to Vanessa. You owe Sherry an apology. A real one. Vanessa looked up, her usual confidence entirely absent. For a moment, I thought she might refuse or offer another excuse. Instead, to my surprise, her composure crumbled completely. I was jealous, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Of the bond you and Emily had. My own mother. She shook her head. We've never been close. I saw how Emily turned to you, trusted you, and I wanted that connection for myself. So I tried to replace you. To show Emily that I could be more valuable, more relevant. I hadn't expected such honesty. By belittling me? By proving I understood this world better than you did. That I could help Emily succeed in ways you couldn't. She wiped at a tear. It was cruel and small, and I'm deeply ashamed. The kitchen fell silent again as we absorbed her words. It wasn't a justification, but at least it was an explanation. Emily broke the silence, her voice strained. I let this happen. I watched Vanessa undermine you, and I said nothing. I'm your daughter, I should have defended you, should have noticed what was happening. We all failed, Michael said quietly. Every time we made Sherry feel unwelcome, every time we excluded her or dismissed her, we contributed to this. So what now? I asked, feeling suddenly exhausted. The emotions of the day had drained me. Where do we go from here? We make it right, Emily said instantly. Somehow, we make it right. Michael nodded firmly. Starting now. Vanessa hesitated, then added, if you'll let us. I looked at their faces, my daughter, remorseful and determined, her husband, genuinely chastened, even Vanessa, stripped of her arrogance and seemingly sincere in her contrition. I'd waited 3 years for acknowledgement, for some sign that I still mattered. Now that it had come, I wasn't sure how to respond. I need time, I said finally. This has been overwhelming. Emily's face fell, but she nodded. Of course. Whatever you need. I stood, gathering my purse. I should go back to my hotel. Let me drive you, Michael offered. No, I have my car. I needed space, time to process everything that had happened. As I headed for the door, Emily followed. Mom, she said, her voice breaking. I love you. I've always loved you. I just lost my way. I hugged her, allowing myself to feel the familiar comfort of my daughter in my arms. I know, sweetheart. I love you too. The drive back to my hotel was a blur. My mind kept replaying scenes from the video, the shock on everyone's faces, the painful confessions that followed. By the time I reached my room, I was emotionally spent. I kicked off my shoes and collapsed onto the bed, not even bothering to change. My phone buzzed with messages, Sandra checking in, Emily apologizing again, even Michael sending a formal but heartfelt note of regret. I silenced the phone, needing quiet. The truth was out now, for better or worse. The walls I'd built around my hurt, my disappointment, had been breached. The question wasn't whether I could forgive them, I already had, in many ways. The real question was whether we could build something new from the ruins of what had been broken. As I drifted towards sleep, exhausted from the day's emotional toll, one thought persisted. For the first time in 3 years, I had been seen. Truly seen. Not just as Emily's mother or Michael's mother-in-law or Vanessa's inconvenient relation, but as Sherry Palmer, a woman who had sacrificed greatly out of love, who deserved respect and consideration. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, perhaps new challenges. But tonight, that recognition was enough. 1 month after the video revelation, I sat on my small apartment balcony, sipping coffee and watching the morning light change. My phone chimed with a text message, another update from Emily about their search for a smaller house. Found a place closer to you. 3 bedrooms, nice yard. Can we swing by to show you later? I smiled slightly, typing back, I have book club until 5. After that works. The weeks following Michael's birthday had brought changes I never could have anticipated. True to their word, Emily and Michael had committed to making things right, though not in ways I would have expected. First came the apologies, not just in the emotional aftermath of the video, but thoughtful, specific acknowledgments of how they had hurt me. Emily came to my apartment alone 3 days after the birthday weekend, a journal in hand. I'd been writing down every memory I can think of, she'd said, her eyes still red-rimmed from crying. Every time I dismissed you, or let Vanessa belittle you, or failed to include you. I want to address each one specifically. I had been moved by her sincerity, but concerned too. Sweetheart, cataloging past hurts won't magically fix things. I know, she'd said quietly. But I need to understand the pattern. How I became someone who could treat her own mother this way. The conversations that followed were painful but necessary. For the first time in years, Emily and I spoke honestly about her insecurities, her desperate desire to fit into Michael's world, her fear that she wasn't sophisticated or polished enough. I started to see her practicality as embarrassing, she'd confessed, shame evident in her voice. When Vanessa would make those comments about your clothes or your job, part of me knew she was being cruel. But another part thought maybe she was right, that I needed to distance myself from my origins to succeed in this new life. And now? I'd asked. Now I see what I gave up for the illusion of belonging, she'd said, her voice steadier. And it wasn't worth it. Michael had approached healing differently. 1 week after the birthday, he'd arrived at my door with a thick folder of papers. What's this? I'd asked, inviting him in. Financial records, he'd said, setting them on my kitchen table. The mortgage for our house, our investments, our debt. I want you to see everything. I had been confused. Why would I need to see this? His expression had been earnest, determined. Because we're selling the house. We're downsizing to something within our actual means, and we want to repay you, at least partially, for what you spent on our wedding. I had tried to refuse, but he was adamant. This isn't just about money, Sherry. It's about honesty. About living authentically instead of putting on a show we can't afford. As for Vanessa, her transformation had perhaps been the most surprising. 2 weeks after the video, she'd invited me to coffee, not at some trendy, overpriced cafe, but at a simple diner near my apartment. I've been in therapy, she'd told me, stirring her coffee absently. Turns out my issues with maternal figures go way back. I had nodded, unsure what to say. That's not an excuse, she'd continued quickly. Just context. What I did, how I treated you, was inexcusable. We'd talked for nearly 2 hours that day. About her strained relationship with her own mother, about her competitive nature, about the insecurities she masked with designer clothes and social climbing. I admire you, she'd said at the end of our conversation, surprising me. Your authenticity. Your generosity without expectation. I've never known anyone like that. Now, a month later, these conversations continued. Some days were easier than others. Old habits didn't disappear overnight, and there were still moments when I felt the ghost of past hurts. But we were trying, all of us. The doorbell rang at precisely 5:30 that evening. Emily and Michael stood outside, both looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. Gone were Michael's stiff suits and Emily's carefully styled hair. Instead, my daughter wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Hi, Mom, she said, hugging me tightly. Ready to see the house? Let me grab my purse. The drive took us to a modest neighborhood about 15 minutes from my apartment. The house they showed me was nothing like their previous showplace. It was smaller, older, with a yard that needed work and a kitchen that hadn't been updated in a decade. What do you think? Emily asked, watching my face as we toured the rooms. "It has good bones," I said honestly. "It reminds me a little of the house where you grew up." She smiled, linking her arm through mine. "That's exactly what I thought. It feels like a home, not a showcase." Michael joined us, leaning against the kitchen doorframe. "We made an offer this morning. If all goes well, we should close by next month." I nodded approvingly. "And the old house?" "Already under contract," Michael said. "The proceeds will cover our new mortgage and allow us to set up a fund for you." I started to protest, but Emily gently cut me off. "Mom, please let us do this. It's not about paying you back, no amount of money could do that. It's about prioritizing what matters." I squeezed her hand, acknowledging the sentiment without accepting or refusing the offer. "We'd discuss the details later." "Actually," Michael said, "we have one more thing to ask." He looked at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. "We'd like you to help us decorate this place," Emily continued. "Not just with suggestions, but really make it a project we do together. I was thinking we might even incorporate some things from our old house, your house." I was touched by the gesture. "I'd like that." Later, as we shared a simple dinner at my apartment, Emily had insisted on cooking, something she'd rarely done in recent years. I felt a sense of peace that had been missing for too long. "Sandra called," I mentioned as we cleared the dishes. "She and David are coming for dinner next weekend. They want to see you both." Emily smiled. "I need to thank them properly. Without that video." She trailed off. "Without that video, we might have continued down the same path indefinitely," Michael finished. I nodded, thinking of the painful but necessary awakening that David and Sandra's intervention had prompted. Sometimes we need to see ourselves through others' eyes to understand the truth. As they prepared to leave that evening, Emily hung back, letting Michael go ahead to the car. "Mom," she said softly, "I know we still have a long way to go. But I want you to know that I see you now. Really see you." I hugged her close, remembering the little girl she had been, appreciating the woman she was becoming again. "I see you too, sweetheart." After they left, I returned to my balcony, watching as twilight settled over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "How was today?" I typed back, "Good. Really good." And it was true. The journey hadn't been easy. The revelations had been painful. But standing in the rubble of what had been broken, we were building something new, something stronger, more honest, more balanced. I thought about the house I'd sold, the home I'd loved. I didn't regret the sacrifice. What I regretted was the silence that followed, the years of swallowing my hurt, of accepting less than I deserved. But now, finally, I had found my voice. Not through anger or recrimination, but through truth. And in that truth, my family had found its way back to me. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I made a silent promise to myself. Never again would I confuse sacrifice with erasure. Never again would I allow my love to render me invisible. I was Sherry Palmer, mother, mother-in-law, friend, woman. And from now on, I would be seen.